Hello everyone, I'm Bejar of by Tinby and welcome to my Tropical Botanicals workshop series in partnership with Strathmore Paper. In these 4 lessons, we're going to discuss easy to learn watercolor techniques which is perfect for painting tropical elements such as plumerias, caladiums, monsteras, and the birds of paradise. And specific for your first lesson, we'll learn how to paint a simple tropical leaf which is called monsteras using the graded wash technique. So the graded wash technique is a fundamental wash in creating seamless gradients that transition from dark to light, depicting tonal values, making our artwork look more realistic. So grab your materials and let's get started. So this is the artwork that we'll be making for this lesson. And as you can see, it's only composed of the same color. We'll actually try to stick with 2 colors and experiment with different tonal values to achieve that subtle monochromatic look. In this lesson, we're going to paint a simple composition of leaves. These are actually composed of 2 types of monsteras, Monstera deliciosas and Monstera adansonii. These are both heart-shaped leaves with holes. The only difference is that Monstera deliciosa has more splits, veins, and smaller holes, while adansonii has bigger holes in it and is smaller in shape structure. But before we paint our artwork, I'll be showing you the materials that we will be needing in this class. First is the paper. I'll be using Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor sheets. Specific for the artwork, I'll be using 8x10. And for the practice sheets, I'll be using 5x7. These are all in cold press, which I really prefer because most of my illustrations require multiple layers. And also based from my experience, this kind of paper can really withstand multiple heavy washes and wouldn't wrinkle when wet, which is for me really perfect when working on semi-realistic paintings. For the brushes, I'll be using Prince & Aqua Elite brushes in 1, 2, and 4. And later on, I'll show you how we'll be working with multiple brushes. But the idea here is that one small brush will be used in adding thick pigmented mixtures and details, and a bigger brush for blending with clean water. I like using round brushes because it's versatile. You can use the tip for details and painting in small sections, and use its belly for washes in larger sections. For the paints, I'm using my Merry Blue watercolors in gouache in Sap Green and Hooker's Green. But feel free to choose any shade of green that you want to use for this artwork. I just personally prefer the non-vibrant shades because it makes my leaves look more realistic. Then for the palettes, I'm using ceramic palettes as it has wells that I can use in preparing my mixtures, and of course it's easier to clean. I need 2 cups of water while painting, so 1 cup for cleaning the brushes and another one for my clean source of water. Then lastly, a tissue so I can dab in my brush for easier water control. So before starting this lesson, you can prepare a sketch first of the artwork and the practice sheets, which is all available in the instructions list of this lesson. So we'll start with the practice sheet before proceeding our artwork sketch. You need to draw 2 rectangles for practicing the graded wash technique and only the right section of monstera leaf so you can see how we will be applying it on the artwork. But let's start by knowing what a graded wash is. So it's basically a skill that we'll be using for this lesson to enable us to paint these soft monochromatic monsteras in watercolor. This fundamental wash is the key to creating seamless gradients that smoothly transition from dark to light, gradually blending into the white of the paper. So in creating a graded wash, I'll basically divide the area that I'll be painting into 3 sections. So the first section is intended for my shadows, the second for my midtones, and the third for my highlights. So the first section, I'll be using a smaller brush. I'll create a very thick mixture of green, more like a cream-like mixture, basically composed of more pigment rather than water. And even if it's thick and pigmented, it has to be wet enough so it can still blend with the next mixture that we will be creating. Our goal here is to actually create our shadows for our illustration. Then I'm gonna gently apply that cream mixture into the first section. And I wanted the edges to be softer. So I'll get a bigger brush and load it with clean water, dab it slightly into a tissue so it's not too wet, and blend it. Slowly drag color from the edges and pull it until the end of the second section. And as you can see, as we add water, it becomes lighter and more transparent, which would make us achieve the midtones. And again, a reminder to ensure it's wet enough that we can still blend it with the water for our next section. For the third section, I'll just soften the edges of the second one and drag it until the edge. And as you can see, it has become very light and blends with the white of the paper, creating our highlights. So we have the darkest one as our shadows, a lighter one for our midtones, and the lightest one for our highlights. Now, let's do the same approach, but this time without the guides. I'll apply a thick mixture using my small brush and create my first section. And with a bigger brush, with clean water, soften its edges and drag the color across the area. Then soften and blend it. Then lastly, the lightest wash by dragging color from the edge and blending it with clean water. So now we're done practicing with our graded wash technique with the two rectangles. Feel free to practice outside the practice sheet so you can prepare before we paint the leaf illustration. So now we're going to apply it in the leaf. So we're not gonna paint on the veins and stems so it can serve as our detail, because personally I don't use white in applying details in watercolor. So I just use negative painting in creating such details, more like preventing myself from painting a certain area so that it can serve as the actual detail of my illustration. So for the leaves, let's start off with a section without veins. So I'm gonna hold my brush vertically, so I'll use the tip of my brush to better control on where I'll be painting and not go beyond the sketch. So I'll be applying the cream mixture, soften its edges with clean water and drag. Then lastly, drag it some more and add clean water. So again, we're not gonna paint over the veins to show the details and do the same approach. So as you can see, we're able to add details by not painting over the veins. So for our next section, this time we have holes. So let's not paint over them as well. Same as what we did with the veins, and apply the graded wash technique. And a tip here is to use the tip of the brush and do an outline first when adding your shadow so you don't end up painting over the holes or the veins. Of course, you can use a smaller brush so it's easier for you to paint. And basically, let's just do the same approach again in painting the last section of this leaf practice. So that's how we're going to use the graded wash technique in painting our Monstera artwork. So let's proceed with the artwork. So I'll start with Monstera Deliciosa leaves first, using Sap Green. In my experience, I normally start painting at the right side of the leaf first, as it's more convenient for me. And I'm using smaller brushes for these because my sketch is kind of small, so it's easier for me to paint, especially that I need to be really cautious and prevent myself from painting the holes and veins of this illustration. So let's just continue applying the graded wash technique, and we'll be doing it section per section given the intricate details of the sketch. So we're done painting the right side of the leaf with the graded wash technique. So the idea here is to actually create shadows at the middle and gradually creating a gradient which would make our leaves look more realistic rather than flat. So we're gonna continue applying the same technique, of course, but this time on the left side of the leaf. To make it easier to paint on, I'm gonna tilt my paper so that the water would flow in the same direction as the leaves, so it's more convenient to create seamless gradients. Be cautious on the line at the center, as we wouldn't want to paint on it for us to be able to show the division of our leaf. What I like about the graded wash technique is that it's easy to apply, and at the same time it gives your artwork that dimension and depth. The repetitive application of using this technique actually makes it very calming and therapeutic for me, as it didn't give me so much pressure in painting, and just makes me enjoy the whole painting process. So once done, I'll move on with my next Monstera deliciosa. And you have to ensure that the other leaves are completely dried out so it wouldn't blend with the new leaf that we are working on. So we're done painting our Monstera deliciosas. Next is to paint the Adansonias, or the small leaves in our sketch. Of course, I'll still apply the graded wash technique. And for the leaves, for the Adansonii, I'm particularly using my Merry Blue watercolor in Hooker's Green. It's actually easier to paint now compared to painting the deliciosas because the Adansonii have bigger holes in it. Next is I'll paint the one below because I wanted to wait for the leaf to dry out first so it wouldn't blend with each other. So again, feel free to tilt your paper as much as you can for easier application of the washes. Then lastly, for the stems, I'll just create a milk mixture, basically composed of 50% water and 50% paint, and use the tip of my brush in painting over the stems. So once everything is completely dried out, use an eraser to remove the pencil marking so that your painting would look softer. And as you remove the markings, you can already see how our gradients blend seamlessly onto the paper. So yeah, this is our finished artwork. You can basically apply the graded wash technique in any leaf illustration that you want to create. We have achieved that soft monochromatic look by just applying a single technique, the graded wash technique. You can create monsteras, alocasias, caladiums, or any leaf or foliage that you want to paint. So that's the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed learning this technique, and I can't wait to see the artworks that you will be creating. Thank you for painting with me, and see you in my next lesson.